Lake Compounce and Quassy are the two main amusement parks located in Connecticut, and both are classic-style parks that have made attempts to modernize themselves in recent years. But which park is better? Today, I am going to compare both Lake Compounce and Quassy Amusement parks. This comparison will be split into sections, and I am going to be talking about each in terms of the price, rides, setting, and food found at both amusement parks. So starting off, I'm going to discuss the price of both Lake Compounce and Quassy. This is probably the most difficult comparison. Lake Compounce offers entrance to the park today admissions ticket, meaning you pay one price for entrance to the park and gain access to all of the attractions. In Quassy, on the other hand, you can either purchase tickets for each ride or a ride band for all-day rides. Depending on how many rides you want to experience, either could be the better deal. However, certain things could tip the scale, especially if you have someone in your group who is not going to be going on the rides, which could make Quassy more appealing. Also, if you just want to go and do a few rides or even just the coasters, Quassy might be the better deal. But if you are looking to spend a full day, they're probably about equal in terms of price in relation to what each park offers. Yes, Quassy is cheaper, but they are also a smaller park. So the value for your money is probably about the same, as you are getting a bigger and more full experience with Lake Compounce, just due to the size of the park. But where they diverge in terms of value is the season pass. The Lake Compounce season pass is a great deal, especially if you get it during one of the many sales over the year, sometimes costing barely more than the price of a day ticket for a lower level season pass. Quassy season pass actually costs about the same amount of money as Lake Compounce's, despite being a significantly smaller park. If you are a local and looking to purchase a season pass, there's really no question which park offers the better deal in terms of price. And with that, I'm going to switch over to comparing the rides at both Quassy and Lake Compounce. Lake Compounce has far more rides than Quassy overall, and really they also have far better rides. Significantly, Lake Compounce features 5 roller coasters, including the world-class wooden roller coaster, Boulder Dash, which alone really places Lake Compounce above Quassy in terms of the quality of the rides. It is worth mentioning, though, that Quassy largely caters to a younger crowd than Lake Compounce does. So while it may not have the best rides, if you have younger kids who will be visiting the park with you, Quassy might be the better option. There are certainly plenty of kiddie rides at Lake Compounce, but overall their rides skew older than Quassy. There are relatively few rides at Quassy that young children would not be able to experience. Meanwhile, massive areas of the park at Lake Compounce would probably be inaccessible to younger children. If you are looking for more and better rides, Lake Compounce is where you should go. But there is a value to Quassy. Especially Wooden Warrior is a standout roller coaster, even if it would not appear to be one at first glance. And with that, I'm going to move on to comparing the setting and theming of both parks. Up until this past year, I would have said that the theming at both parks was relatively equal. But now I am going to give Lake Compounce the upper hand. They made a real effort at improving the overall look of their park for their 175th anniversary, and it is a notable change, updating many areas that were beginning to look dated and improving a lot of the areas that had always been sore thumbs in the park. This is not to say that Quassy doesn't have good theming. It really does, for its size, with a lot of different fun elements that tie it into a classic amusement park feel. But the settings of the two parks is really what makes all the difference. Both parks feature a lakeside setting, but Quassy actually makes use of the lake a lot more than Lake Compounce does, with a boat ride and paddle boats on top of swimming, whereas at Lake Compounce, the lake is largely just decorative, apart from a small swimming area. This is not always how it was. Lake Compounce used to offer boat rides, paddle boats, and even a slide that emptied out into the lake, although that particular element has a tragic history. But in recent years, they really haven't been using the lake basically at all, which is strange for a park which includes it in the title. At Quassy, though, the lake is a major part of the park. What Lake Compounce does have, though, is an amazing mountainside setting that the park makes use of wonderfully. Its signature attraction, which I've already mentioned, Boulder Dash, speeds through the tree-filled mountainside, which gives the park a wonderful nature-filled setting on not just its main ride, but the entire park. This does make the park somewhat hilly, but nothing that should be difficult for anyone to manage, and it adds to the charm of Lake Compounce. And finally, I'm going to move on to the last section of this comparison, the food at both Lake Compounce and Quassy. The food at both of these parks is incredible, with standout offerings at both parks. Lake Compounce has always had good food, but they've also made an effort to improve their food in the last couple of years. The park has some great chain restaurants, including Johnny Rockets and Pink's Hot Dogs, as well as some great original offerings, specifically the Potato Patch, which is a long-standing restaurant in the park, and the new for 2021 Timberjack Chow House, which turned one of the worst restaurants in the park into one of the best. There are a lot of options here, and few, if any, are bad, and there are several standout things to eat here. They even had a food festival in 2021 that hopefully will continue in future years. Quassy, on the other hand, has more limited offerings, being a smaller park, but the Quassy restaurant I do need to mention has some of the best food that I've ever had in a theme park. It was a real standout of my most recent visit to Quassy, and I cannot recommend it enough. Both Lake Compounce and Quassy do what they do exceedingly well. They just do different things. Lake Compounce has slowly but surely been growing into a full-day experience with some amazing world-class rides and gradual improvements to its overall experience, culminating in the 175th anniversary celebration. Quassy, meanwhile, provides an amazing classic amusement park experience that is perfectly targeted for families. You can have an amazing day at both of these parks, just make sure you know what you are getting into with each of them. As while they are both great, they are very different experiences. So, with that, thanks for watching, and be sure to hit like and subscribe. It really helps us out a lot, and if you haven't yet, turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. If you liked this video, you might like our other comparison video where we compare Six Flags New England and Lake Compounce. And since you all seem to like this, let me know other parks you would like me to compare in the future.